Thanks, Bob. Thank you so much. And good morning, everyone. How are you doing? Wow, it is amazing that we're in New Orleans and you're up at 9 a.m. That's remarkable in and of itself. I really want to thank the OAC and Your Weight Matters for actually giving this slot of time to a topic that we don't often address outside of my world of veterinary medicine, and that is obesity. And before we get started, I want to just tell you a little bit about contact information because it's going to come important later. But look me up on the internet. The reason that I'm really here is because in 2005, pet obesity was such an issue to me that I founded something called the Association for Pet Obesity Prevention. And it has really been one of my singular passions for the past, 12 years or so going on. We are the people that do all the surveys. So when you hear these news stories saying, 54% of dogs in the U.S. are now classified as overweight or obese, that's usually our data that's coming out. We also I'll be asking you for some help later. We do surveys of pet owners on their attitudes and behaviors around pet feeding and nutrition and so forth. But again, please, if you're into the social media, I encourage you to look me up. I got a great picture of Dr. Bob Kushner and his lovely wife dancing last night. So if you kind of want to see what's been going on behind the scenes here. But I want to start out by saying obesity is a shared disease. And I want you all to say this out loud. Obesity is a shared disease. And this is the most important part of this talk. The fact that obesity is not still widely accepted as a disease in even the human medical community, and certainly not in the veterinary medical community, is a problem. Because it is a disease, and as long as it is viewed as something that you create yourself, as long as it is viewed as something that just happens because you don't do certain things, because you're lazy or because whatever, then we will not, as a medical community, solve this crisis. Now, on the veterinary side, you're probably going, wait a second, fat dog, fat cat, who cares? Well, a lot of people care, including me, because I dedicated my whole life to do one thing, and that is serve animals. So when I see them suffering from a disease, and I have colleagues saying, that's just because it's lazy, it offends me. It offends me, the language that we use and the way that we actually discuss the disease of obesity. So I wanted to start out by saying to you this morning, this is a shared disease. The dog with obesity, the cat with obesity, heck, the horse with obesity has a lot in common with the human with obesity. And I think we have to learn from translational medicine, which is what this conference was all about. It was actually an opportunity for veterinarians and medical practitioners to come together and say, you know what? We're kind of doing the same thing, and we have the same challenges. How can we work together in a collaborative fashion to overcome these problems? And there's another part to this that you might not have given thought to, but I'm going to share with you today, and that is pet care shaming. And it happens all across the spectrum. The most obvious form of shaming, and many of us have engaged in this room, and that is you see a dog that you view as being undercared for. Maybe it's in the back of a pickup truck or tethered to a large chain. Well, we do tend to then pass judgment on the client or the pet owner, rightly or wrongly, but it's a judgment. On the other end of the spectrum, you see a celebrity toting around a Chihuahua in a Louis Vuitton purse. There's shame that maybe she's gone a little too far. And veterinarians are caught in the middle, and we're just as guilty of this as anyone else. In fact, when it comes to obesity, many veterinarians are guilty of judging the client for the problem. So they come in, you bring in your obese dog, and they suddenly say, you're not walking it enough. You're giving it too many treats. And while those things may be true, they don't help us recognize the real problem, which is there's a disease process going on. And I always like to tell colleagues, and on TV, there was a television show I did a couple of years ago, and I remember I'm sitting down with this family, and we're having an intervention style with their grossly, morbidly obese dog. And the husband continues to crack fat jokes, the whole segment. He's a comedian, he's got jokes. He's got every fat, big, huge, blimp joke in the book. And I'd had enough. So toward the end of this segment, when we're sitting down, I just go, listen, I think a lot of the problem here resides with your attitude towards this. Let me just ask you this. I found out they had lost a dog to cancer. I said, did you make fun of your dog with cancer? Did you call him, hey, you stupid cancer dog, why don't you just get out and boost those white blood cells and kill that cancer off? Did you blame the dog for getting cancer? So I would encourage you, as you go through your life and you're confronting the issues of shame when it comes to human obesity, remember that there's also a component to this that is applying directly to our other children, the dogs and cats that we share our homes with. This pet care shaming is something that I think we have to address. Now, for me as a medical practitioner, I don't see a fat dog. I don't see an obese cat. I see an animal with an inflammatory disease. I see, quite frankly, adipocytokines. I see nothing but a storm of harmful chemicals, hormones, compounds circulating throughout the blood, that my goal as a doctor, as a practitioner, is to somehow thwart and stop and abate that inflammatory process, because that is a disease that I am trained to combat. And see, this is a different mindset. And I would encourage you, if you are a medical practitioner in this room today, to make sure that you are viewing these patients not as something that's sort of outside, it's this other thing. It's actually something within. It's an inflammatory cascade that is going on constantly that we can and must do something to change. Because that is the real root of this problem. When people say, Ernie, why do you care so much about these obese dogs and cats? I mean, what's the big deal? You're not going to win that battle. Good luck with that. Why don't you go beat your head against a brick wall? I say, well, I think we have medical tools, diagnostic abilities, to actually do something about it. So I want you to remember that we are dealing with inflammation at its core root cause. And for me, I just don't see another health threat that comes close. In fact, when we look at the statistics, more dogs and cats are affected by obesity in the United States than any other condition, save periodontal disease, which is oral problems, calculus, gingivitis, periodontitis. But I can tell you this, you can live a lot longer with bad teeth than you can with morbid obesity. And you're going to have a higher quality of life, I would argue. So what's the biggest health threat? It's pretty simple as far as I'm concerned. Well, I'll give you a few minutes here just of some of our latest data, just so you know and understand the scope of the problem. The problem is big. No pun intended. 54% of the pets surveyed in our latest research, so we basically have veterinarians give us, we do this in October, and we just say, all the pets that you see for routine visits on this day, we have different scales, and they tell us if they were overweight, obese, so forth, their weight. 54% of dogs, 59% of cats. That's a huge number. And the reality is, year over year, and I just gave you the last 5 years of our data, we continue to see this number creep up. I mean, it's not significant. Sometimes I'll do these media interviews, and they're like, well, it only went up, 0.2%. It's like, it went up. That's not the direction we want this to head in. And again, these are estimates, but we think they're pretty darn close. I can tell you, my guess is there's such underreporting in the vet world. There's this other component to it, which we'll talk about in a moment, but underreporting is an issue as well. But we see that this is an issue. And the numbers really get interesting to me when we dive into, when vets segment them out with being overweight to obese, and we'll explain how we do that in just a moment. But we do use something similar to a BMI chart. It's called a body condition score for dogs. But the reality is we start to see the push, as I say, toward the right. And that push toward the right just means that, okay, maybe the total population of pets with obesity isn't growing at an alarming rate, but the number of pets with clinical obesity is. And in fact, if you kind of look at our latest data, you can see clearly that for cats, it's not just that the cat has obesity, it's the cat is now getting what we would call, in our terminology, super obesity, or you're calling it now, I think, severe obesity, morbid obesity. So we're getting that push to the right on our curves. But we've got 3 problems I want to talk to you about today and how you can help. The first is, what is obesity in pets? We don't have a definition. In fact, we even have arguments over how we assess normal body condition. And you can see here we've got 2 competing scales worldwide. There's a 1 to 5 scale. There's a 1 to 9 scale. AKC, which is the American Kennel Club, they have their own set of breed charts. So there's a lot of confusion. So many times, good-intentioned pet owners will come up to me and say, but he's normal, and they'll pull out some chart, and maybe it even backs up what they're saying, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. So we're still arguing over this. Now, I can tell you one of the things that I know Ted Kyle and Bob Kushner know that I've been trying to do is to gain consensus. So I think that it's time for the world, the veterinary world, to actually say, we're going to decide on one scale. Because even though these scales are flawed, the BMI has limitations, the BCS has limitations, we at least need to agree on the nomenclature, the terminology. What is it? Is it a 2? Because I'll get these phone calls from veterinarians who'll say, I'm dealing with a dog who's a BCS of 4. I don't know if that's a normal weight dog or an obese dog. Which scale are you using, doctor? Very, very confusing. It's only been in the past 2 or 3 years, this is some research from my friend Jane Armstrong up at Washington State, that we've actually tried to validate what BCS means. So we were using just sort of our feeling, palpation, measurements, but now we're actually able to use, MRIs to validate how much body fat there is, corollary, with these BCSs. So, and actually some of this research on the right was done by a friend of mine at the University of Tennessee as well. So we're just now in the infancy. 3 years ago, this was published to actually show what body fat percentage. We're just learning. But the great news is we have a mentor called the human medical field. You guys have been here, done this, and we're learning from you very, very rapidly. So the first thing is agreeing on what is obesity, and then we have to come together as a people and say it is a disease. The American Medical Association in 2013 declared obesity a disease. That is significant, profound. It affects how insurance companies deal with payments in the human world. On the pet world, again, we're just sort of on our own. Nobody knows. We don't even know what is obesity. We have a long way to go. Problem number 2, we have confusing communication. Many of you, in fact, we're going to share with you some data in just a second, have probably never even had this conversation with your veterinarian. Because when we look at our data, 49% of pet owners said their vet had talked to them about their pet's weight or body condition in the past year. 93% of the respondents had gone to the vet in the past year, and only 49% said, my vet said anything about it. Now, interestingly, confoundingly, when we ask them, okay, so if you don't know your dog is overweight or obese, you don't know any of this about body condition, how are you choosing your food? So we gave them choices like, to keep them at a lean weight, to improve vitality and health and energy and all that stuff. Quality, which 80% of pet respondents said quality was what determined their pet food selection, which instantly the researcher in me pops up because what is quality? It gets really nebulous quickly. Your version of quality versus mine, So we asked that. So in our latest survey, we kind of dug around into that. And we said, what do you think about quality in food and so forth? So I'll share with you some of the more interesting highlights. Number 1, everybody agrees that obesity is a problem. Pet owners, 87% and 98% of vet professionals. So yes. How would you classify your pet's current weight? Well, 81% of pet owners and 87% of vet professionals said, my pet is just fine. So this is something that I wrote about in my book, Chow Hounds, many, many years ago. It's called the fat pet gap. It is the fact that most people now look at their pet with obesity and they can't identify that it has a problem. And that's because public perception has shifted. It's very difficult for a pet owner to tell. The body morphology, the way the muscles are laid out between a Chihuahua and a Great Dane are significant. So sometimes you're looking at that Jack Russell Terrier and you're going, it looks normal to me. So again, it's very difficult. Communication is hard around this. Do you ever worry about the quality of your pet's food affecting their long-term health? Well, about half the people said yes. We do worry about it. So the food we feed our pets probably impacts what diseases they get and how long they live and so forth. Do you believe, though, that quality nutrition can extend a pet's life expectancy? And here's where we get into some interesting data. 98% of pet owners and 99% of vets agree that the food we feed, what we fill that dog bowl and that cat bowl with every morning and evening, actually can improve and enhance life expectancy. And that's really important because everybody is becoming now, we understand the importance of food and health. So what I'm trying to get people to do is make healthier choices, educate them about it. And this is where we get into some arguments because pet owners don't think corn is healthy for dogs. And I can tell you the research does not support this at all. That's not saying that corn is great for every dog, every situation, but 6% of pet owners in our latest survey said corn is healthy. Of course, 48% of vet professionals. We got a lot of confusion out there. And it was kind of interesting because when I gave this data at a conference earlier this year, wisely, a veterinarian from the audience raised their hand. He says, why did only 48% of vets agree with this? I don't have a reason. I just can tell you there's a lot of confusion. Do you think organic pet foods are healthier? Well, 43% of pet owners said yes, organic is healthier. 23% of veterinary professionals think that. I got some news for you. There are no standards for organic pet foods in this country. You can pretty much slap organic on it and just, unless you're going to get investigated, unless you really cause harm, you're going to get away with it. So right now, it's a crapshoot with organic and pet foods. Now, we are really working hard. In fact, this week, one of the regulatory bodies that gives model practice acts for pet food regulations is going to be discussing this, but I can tell you we're really not going to have any consensus around that term organic. Next year at the earliest, my guess it'll be 2019. So organic, maybe, maybe not. Do you think raw diets are healthier for dogs and cats? 35% of pet owners said yes, 15% of vet professionals. Again, discordant responses. Now, you'll notice up here that when we ask these questions, we try to use language that people can commonly, you've probably heard of raw diet. The problem with that terminology is there's a wide spectrum of raw diets. There are some raw diets that I'm absolutely in favor of and support, and there's evidence behind it. And then there are a whole lot of raw diets out there that are downright dangerous for both the pet and the family. So I don't know what people mean necessarily when they say raw, because we have to dig deeper into that. Do you think low or no grain diets are healthier for dogs? Well, the majority of pet owners think that low or no grain diets are healthier for dogs. And, there's really no evidence to support that. So the science tells us one thing, and the attitude, the marketing is the other. And that's really the point of this section of this talk, is the fact that most of these messages, this confusing communication, is driven by marketing. I mean, there was a famous pet food company that was sued by another big pet food company, and one of them might have the name that has a color that's in the rainbow. I like blue. I think the color blue is beautiful. And I think out west they used to hunt buffalo, but I'm not sure if they still hunt buffalo. But this company was sued that has to do with Rainbow and Wild West, and they were making misleading claims. In fact, the court said, yes, you are lying to the public. I mean, they had to pay, what was it, like $30 million in damages. So we got issues because it's still the Wild West when it comes to marketing. And a lot of people have confusion around what is quality pet food. Is corn evil? Is corn an ally? Again, we have a lot of questions. The third problem that we have that I want to touch on today is, how do we treat it? How do we treat it? Yesterday, Dr. Kahan came up and gave a fabulous talk. Man, I took pictures of every slide. I got 2 pages of notes on all of the pharmacotherapeutic agents you have available to treat obesity in humans. Guess how many approved drugs we have in the U.S. to treat obesity in dogs or cats? It starts with a Z. Zero. Right. Nothing. Nada. We had one drug several years ago. It had such disastrous side effects, and by disastrous I mean disaster pants side effects, that nobody used it. And really didn't have great results once you removed it from the dog. It's a classic drug that really just didn't deliver. So how do we treat it? How do we treat pet obesity? Well, we know, I can tell you from doing this for most of my life, that there's got to be more to this story than just exercise and cutting calories. And yet, that is still the only evidence that I can give you today. Now, yesterday, Dr. Bob Kushner and Dr. Champagne from LSU, Pennington, gave a great point-counterpoint on calories. Are they the same? Are some calories better than others, or good or bad, or all that sort of stuff. And it's very interesting because, we know clearly that certain types of diets get better results in animals for weight loss, and they produce more satiety. And this all has to do around protein molecule, which Dr. Kushner and Dr. Champagne so eloquently articulated to us yesterday. So we know that we can manipulate the formulations of a dog or cat's diet, of a horse's diet, and actually get results that last. And you saw some beautiful charts yesterday in several of the sessions from Gardner and others just showing, hey, you know what, if you reduce the calories, weight comes off, And if you actually combine that with other modalities, other treatments, then you're going to have even better results. But in dogs, all I've got right now, in cats, all I can offer you is let's look at the food bowl and maybe try to get them to chase a feather dancer. So I really feel frustrated. And I'm approached constantly by, little drug companies, startups, and they've got this molecule that they were working on the human side and didn't pan out, but maybe it'll work in a dog, maybe it'll work in a cat. We're just not getting any traction. So my plea to you, if you're in this part of the world, if you're out there and you do this type of research, please consider translating it to a dog or cat model. I mean, this year, Americans are going to spend well over $60 billion on pets. So the market is there. It's maturing. We know that a drug like this is in high demand because the majority of pets are affected by obesity. So we need some help. I need some help. People often ask me, well, why don't you guys do surgery? Why don't you do sleeves or bands or whatever? Ethical issues. Got some serious ethical issues. Many of you know and have experienced that these surgical procedures are not without risk. And, again, doing that for an animal, we haven't come to any consensus on that. So right now, that's off the table. So I can't do a lap band as much as I would like to in certain cases. And I actually do. I actually think that there probably are some indications that this would be fabulous. I'll deal with these cats that are 36 pounds, and the normal cats should weigh 10 to 12 pounds. And I know, boy, if we could somehow get to it quicker, we could help, because they all develop type 2 diabetes. I mean, that's just a given for most of these cats. I would say to you today, if you're in the audience, the next time you take your dog, your cat to the veterinarian, you demand, I'll repeat, you demand specific recommendations. What happens too often, and my colleagues know, I berate them constantly, is they just say, exercise a little more. You should take him for a walk in the evenings, Why don't you just cut back on the treats? That means nothing. That means nothing. And then they'll put it on a diet. They'll say, well, here's a prescription diet that will help your pet lose weight, without any follow-up. And so then you come back in a year later and your dog gained 2 pounds. And you're like, well, I was feeding him the diet food. How could that be? And we all know that to successfully combat obesity, you can't just half do it. You can't just not pay attention. I'll tell you two funny little studies that we've done over the years. Back in 2006, I was really concerned. I have a good buddy of mine from Germany, and I think Bob Kushner, you've met him before, Dr. Alex German. And I kept complaining to him. I was like, man, listen, I'm telling you, every time we tell people to weigh food or measure food, they're imprecise, they're making terrible mistakes, and and everybody was kind of like, Ernie, come on. So what if they're a half ounce over? What if they're a gram over? Who cares? I mean, really just make a difference. So I did some calculations. So I took all the popular dog and cat foods at the time in 2006, and I calculated up what would happen if you fed, and it breaks out at about 22 pounds, 10 kilograms. If you fed different weight dogs and cats what you recommended, and you gave them an extra 10 pieces of food. Now, 10 tiny kibbles of cat food. So in your mind, hopefully you're imagining, that's not very much. So if you put it in the food bowl and you just accidentally gave 10 extra food, 5 in the morning, 5 in the evening, whatever. What impact would that have on the weight status of that pet? And up to about 10 kilograms, 22 pounds for dogs and all cats, if you give as few as 10 extra kibbles a day, your pet gains a pound a year. So this precision is critical. And this is why you'll hear people like me and others say you have to weigh the food, because obviously if you try to use volume to do something that was measured in mass or weight, all the errors are confounded, and it's quite remarkable. So you really have to pay attention. You have to push your vet for brands. What your vet doesn't want to do is give you a brand recommendation, because they don't know what you know, and they're afraid of that. Because they're afraid you're going to come back and say, oh, that has a lot of corn in it. I hate corn. Corn's bad. Or you're going to say, oh, that's a high carbohydrate diet. I wanted a high protein diet. Now, veterinarians know nutrition, despite what the media would have you believe and what the internet and Facebook post. I mean, we take a doggone large amount of nutrition. I mean, it starts even in undergrad with our basic animal nutrition courses that we have to take. So even though they always say, oh, you only got, a pet food company comes in and gives you 4 hours, I don't know where that school is. Now, I graduated, 25, 26 years ago. So maybe, but No. We learn a lot of nutrition. What happens is your veterinarian feels like they're a salesperson. And so they don't feel comfortable telling you actually the brand, which is what you need and what you must demand. Because otherwise you go to the pet store, you go to the grocery store, and you are overwhelmed with the choices. I mean, you're looking at these, and then what do you judge it on? You judge it on primarily 2 criteria, and this is from years of surveying pet owners' behaviors in the pet food store. There's 2 primary criteria. The first and most obvious is price. So everybody has a price point, and whatever you feel comfortable with, if you're going to spend up to $10 a bag, up to $100 a bag, you go right to $100. Like, it's so funny because we've watched their behaviors. Like, if there's two dog foods of equal or comparable value, and one is $90 and one is $80, and they're comfortable with spending up to $100, they always go for the $90. It's really remarkable psychology there. So price, duh, got that. Second thing, pictures. It's price and pictures. That's what's dictating your decision. You look at the bag. And in fact, you might have missed it, but there was a class action lawsuit against several manufacturers recently in the pet food world. And basically pet owners, they said, hey, this is misleading advertising. We're looking at this bag. It has this beautiful cut, the salmon fillet. It has blueberries and green peas. And they're laid out on this wonderful plank of oak. And they're going, that's not in the bag. That's misrepresenting it. And doggone it if the judge didn't say any pet owner who believes that that picture is in the bag isn't intelligent enough to make a purchase decision. So they threw this case out. Well, they judged in favor of the pet food companies. So you are being bamboozled by clever psychological pricing tactics and beautiful pictures. So you've got to talk to your veterinarian about this. You also have to demand, how many calories should I feed my dog or cat? How many calories? Most of you in this room, which is so good, I mean, I got to tell you, it's amazing to be around such a community. You probably calories better than me, way better. You know what foods contain, how many, you probably right now already got a running tally of how many calories you've had today. It's remarkable. You guys are amazing. But we often don't then apply that amazing ability to our pets. And we don't even have a clue. In fact, I would argue, without anybody ever telling me anything, that nobody in this room could tell me how many calories their dog or cat needs today. All right, one person. We'll put her on the spot. How much? No, I would never do it. 2.5 to 3? 240. Nice. And what is it? Cockapoo, 10 pounds. That's pretty darn close. Probably be more towards 220, but that's a different story. We have to talk about activity because I'm guessing 220 is a better number. But regardless, I like that. The fact that you know that 240 kcals per day, is really, really important. So you need to demand that. And then how does that translate into frequency and all that stuff? And let me just tell you one thing right now. People want easy fixes. Now, nobody in this room wants an easy fix. Everybody in here knows they want to struggle and they want to fight through this. They want to spend the next 30 years combating obesity, right? No, I don't. But I will tell you this. Frequency is not a silver bullet, nor is it a panacea. So feeding more frequent small meals, that only plays into the psychology of cats. So yes, cats should be fed 4 to 6 meals a day, if at all possible. That engages that inner predatory drive that they have. They have a completely different energy system than dogs. Cats are running off glycemic sugars, okay? Dogs and humans were running off fatty acids. So, totally different, disparate systems. But frequency, feed your dog twice a day, it's fine. Feed your cat as many times a day as possible, that's better. If you are feeding your cat with an all-day buffet, big bowl style, don't do it. Don't do it. That's the worst way to do it. Treats, exercise, activity, push your veterinarian on these things. Now, years ago, I started I stumbled into it, quite frankly, because we wound up having the biggest 2 issues with dog and cat weight loss are what I call plateaus and pestering. Now, first of all, plateauing is something that you talked about yesterday, Dr. Kushner, about how we have metabolic adaptations that kick in, actually muscle tissues. Things change within the body that mean you hit a plateau. So you knock the calories down, you increase your activity, whatever it is that you're doing, you reach a point where you stop getting the same results. So those curves don't just continue down, nice and smooth. So you hit some plateaus. And so what I realized quickly was we're going to have to make micro adjustments throughout this period. So that was the first thing that led me to this step weight loss program. Second thing is pestering. Pestering was the real reason that I developed this program, because nobody likes being awakened at 3 a.m. by a kitty cat going, feed me, feed me. And if you have a cat, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So we tried to develop ways, tricks that you could do that, and so we started, instead of just crash diving, and although I do some crash dives for some serious obesity cases, in general, we don't crash dive the calories anymore, we just step it out. I will tell you that there's a major pet food company that pretty much lifted this out, which is going to be interesting. So, but hey, it's all free, but next year you're going to see a major pet food company do this exact program, so and I'm happy for them. Yeah. So what can you do today? What do I need for you to do to help pets and people? Well, the first thing, if you do have any suggestions, email me. This goes straight to me, and only to me. Now, do not email me with your question about 240 versus 220 calories. That's not what I use this email for. I want people that have a solution, a suggestion. Maybe you have a walk with a dog club in your area, and you say, hey, how can we get pets involved? We can help you there. Maybe you're saying, hey, what are some... I'm a trainer and I want to expand, and incorporate dogs into it. There's a great company called Canine Fit Club. I've worked with these guys on developing their programs for years. They do a great job with this. There's all these things. If you have solutions, email me this. If you're in the tech world or have a cousin or a brother or a husband or wife or somebody that does apps, have them call us because we are looking for people to help us on this. And we pay for this kind of stuff, but we really want to roll out. We need your help. The most important thing you can do, though, is to change your attitude and language around this topic. Really understand that people first should be applying to pets first, too. That there is a lot of pet care shaming that occurs. And maybe it's, under the carpet, so to speak. But it is real and it is damaging and impactful. And I think that we really have to address this as a disease. We have to understand that, people get cancer, dogs get cancer. People get heart disease, cats get heart disease. Humans suffer from crippling arthritis, and so do dogs and cats and horses and gerbils and rabbits and anything else with legs. We have to understand this is a shared community. This is a shared problem. And if we can come together, we can beat this. And then I have one other hidden agenda. It's childhood obesity. I will never speak about pet obesity without linking it directly to childhood obesity. Because I think the solution to childhood obesity comes at least partly with a leash. Kids today aren't engaging in physical activity. We're looking for ways to motivate them. Dr. Kushner years and years ago not that many years ago, just a couple of years ago, did a study that showed people stayed more engaged, energized, motivated to walk if they had responsibility of a dog. We know that pet ownership has tremendous health benefits. Just the fact that you can own a pet means that your lifestyle is conducive to healthier habits. So how can we connect kids with walking a dog? How can we help combat childhood obesity by confronting pet obesity? That's really my main effort. Again, here's social media. Please feel free to reach out to me. I would encourage you all. Each October, we do surveys of course, we do this prevalence study, but we ask people like you for your attitudes and behaviors around pets. So please follow me on social media. Go to petobeసిtyprevention.org. Sign up for the survey. It's a 20-question survey. It takes no time at all. It's anonymous, 100% anonymous. We just want to get your attitudes and feelings so that we can help further this issue. I want to thank OAC. I want to thank Ted Kyle and Bob Kushner for two things. One, for putting together this. But number two, for inspiring a community of people to take action. This is perhaps the biggest challenge that our species faces. And these people, OAC, the entire staff, all the speakers, we are diligently fighting to improve the quality of life. And of course, I'm doing the four-legged critters. But just to be inspired by people like you that I revere, people in this room sharing your stories. The breakouts that I've had, the witnesses. I can tell you, I'm usually in a room full of veterinarians who are incredibly jaded and skeptical and not interested at all in obesity. They just want to know, what's the quick fix? You don't have one this year? Fine, I'm out of here. But to be surrounded by people who get it, to see such love and comfort, to have such a safe space created, I got to tell you, I've been so deeply touched, and it is something that I will take with me forever, and it has shaped the way I think and talk about obesity, and I am incredibly indebted to OAC, and in particular Bob and Ted for all that. I've got time for a few minutes of questions. I must apologize. I have to leave immediately afterward. I have to be in Florida to give lectures tonight and all day tomorrow, so I have to jet out of here. I have a 12 o'clock, so it has been my honor and privilege to be here with you. So thank you very much. We'll take questions.
Hi there, and thank you very much, because as a formerly obese person myself and with obese children, or children with obesity, excuse me, I need help. And my issue is with my cat right now, and you say feed them 4 or 5 times a day, but don't leave a food bowl out. And how do you do that when you're working and you're in and out of your house? And maybe the audience can help with that also, brainstorming here. What is the solution to that?
Yep. Great question. So how do you feed your cat more frequently if you have a busy life? Because we all have a busy life. The simple truth is this. You feed them a small amount in the morning, feed them as soon as you get home, you feed them at 8 o'clock when you turn on your TV show, and right before you go to bed. That's 4 feedings. There are automated feeders. I'm just not a big fan of that because I do believe strongly in the personal connection and the bond that we get to participate in when we actually, the act of feeding. The act of feeding is joyful. And it's also important for the animal because that's like, Mom and Dad, okay, this is awesome. It's a shared communal thing. So again, just break it up into bite-sized pieces. People think that cats, they see them as grazers, but what they don't understand is that grazing behavior is predatory drive. So they're actually saying, I want to hunt now, and now I'm done. And they come back later. That's not grazing. Grazing actually, the definition of grazing is to eat for extended periods of time. Cats do not eat for extended periods of time. They eat very small, discrete amounts of calories, and they stop. We've got lots of tips and tricks, certainly on the website, and I've written exhaustively, but just simply say a little bit here. I like soy sauce bowls for cats. Again, there's some psychological things. People always say, psychological for the cat. No, for the owner. You filled up the bowl. It's a soy sauce bowl.
Are you more of a dry food or wet food per pound?
I'm a wet food for cats in particular.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And there's a lot of reasons for that, but primarily protein and fat content can be increased in a canned formulation, and number 2, precision in measuring. Great question. Yes, ma'am.
Hello. I'm a little taller. Okay, so I have a question regarding the food. We've had a dog that passed. We fed it the big box store type food, and she had more issues with, I'm sure it's congenital, more like heart disease and whatnot like that, but she also developed the crystals and stuff like that. And she went downhill. We had to put her down. So we have new dogs we rescued, and I've been feeding them a good whole meat kibble. And I was wondering what type of fresh whole meat that we could get from our local pet store.
Right.
We have a local, it's called Hollywood.
So my preferred way of feeding, and it's detailed in my book, Chow Hounds, in intimate detail, but it's something we call the hybrid menu. So I think for most people, we're busy. There should be a combination of commercial diet with home-prepared meals. Now, I would prefer you do home-prepared meals all the time, but that's just impractical. I'm busy. My kids are in school. It's just not going to happen. But we can cook for them on the weekends, and maybe that's 2 or 3 meals throughout the week. So the first question is there like a raw meat preference? No, there's not, and I don't like raw meats in general. Okay, I do like high-pressure pasteurization, HPPS, which are Stella and Chewy's and Instinct and things like that. So there's actually processing that can prepare raw food safer. So it kills the E. coli, Campylobacter, and Salmonella, or most of it. That's what the studies show. So I would stick with that end of the spectrum and then supplement it with real whole foods as much as possible. I am a fish protein guy, and I actually like the oily fishes, the mackerels, the salmons for dogs and for cats in particular. So I do lean towards those. That also has to do with environmental sustainability. So I do have lots of other things. And that's the issue with nutrition is I always try to teach veterinarians that it is a nutritional philosophy. And so meaning that you can believe differently on certain aspects. Like you could be all in for raw, and that's cool. But it's why did you make that decision? How did you come to that? And what can I do to help you make sure you do it correctly? Because then we get into micro and macronutrient balance. Because if you're just feeding, people will feed their dogs, believe it or not, just raw chicken necks. I mean, that's like a common thing with something called the BARF diet. So predominantly, they feed them raw chicken necks. And they are missing out on so many micronutrients that we see a lot of problems, especially potassium, calcium imbalances. So,
Thank you.
yeah, good question. Yes, ma'am.
Are they doing any studies, or are you aware of any studies where they're sort of comparing genetic stuff between litters of cats or dogs, and and comparing it to human twin studies, or?
Yeah, obviously the translation between animal and human would be suspect, but the reality is we know that there are genetic markers. There are indicators for food drive. So there's a big lab study that was published almost 2 years ago now that actually showed that certain dogs have more of a drive to eat, and which we've actually, if you think about evolutionary process, we would have selected for those dogs because they were easier to train. If they liked food, then we could train them quicker and easier. So yes, there's a strong genetic component toward it. I think it's more around satiety. I think that that's really, we're looking at, I mean, everybody's focused on the cannabinoids, but I think it's probably a little further over, but that's just my own personal belief. But yes, genetics play a big, big role. Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering if there's a standard, like, for fitness and exercise with pets, like a standard recommendation, the way there is with us with, like, strength and resistance
great
and cardio?
question. Yeah, so she says, is there a standard recommendation? And this is where we really get into, you have to understand the species differences. So for dogs, and if you really want to read, chow hounds, I'm really proud of it because I go into great detail on why they became our best friend. Like, dogs became our best friend because of energy expenditure and diet preference. So they're omnivores just like us. They could eat most of the same stuff, and then they exercise and burn the same amount of energy. So for dogs, it's about the same, 200, 250 minutes a week. Seems to be perfect, 20 to 30 minutes of aerobic activity a day. Cats, though, because different energy system, they need to have short bursts of activity. So this is why you play with a laser pointer, a feather dancer, remote control toys. And what you want to try to do is get 3 to 5 5-minute play periods a day. And for some cats, that's literally a 2-minute period, but it's that all-out pouncing, playing, leaping, jumping, get a box, whatever.
Would some dogs need higher intensity levels than others, or?
Intensity is a tricky term from a medical perspective. I would say I focus more on aerobic activity. Would they require more duration? Absolutely. Intensity is problematic just from a medical standpoint. Okay, okay. That's it? Okay, I'm being cut off. Really? Oh, no, okay. I'm sorry. Thank you so much.